You know, I feel compelled, Bill, after that generous introduction to inoculate myself. I live, as you know, in a tiny town in New Hampshire, and I've lived there for the last 32 years, made all the films from there. It's a town whose center has fewer people than are in this room tonight. Everybody knows everybody else's business, but I've had on my refrigerator an old and now faded New Yorker cartoon that shows two men standing in hell, the flames licking up around them, and one guy says to the other, "Apparently my over 200 screen credits didn't mean a damn thing." And of course they don't. They really don't. Particularly in our small town, you are measured by the content of the character and not the length of the resume, which is as it should be, and I think as it is in this extraordinary state. I had the great good fortune in the mid-1980s to make a film on the history and meaning behind the Statue of Liberty. And during the course of that production, I had the even greater good fortune to meet and interview Vartan Gregorian, an immigrant from Tabriz, Iran, who had become an American citizen and risen to run at that point. He would go on to become the president of Brown University and now heads the Carnegie Corporation. He was then the president and director of the New York Public Library. And after an extremely interesting and passionate interview on the meaning behind the Statue of Liberty, for him, this immigrant, for whom the word liberty and the idea of freedom had real meaning, not something that was learned or acquired or, more importantly or sadly, taken for granted, as too many of us do. He took me on a long and really amazing tour of literally the miles and miles of stacks of the New York Public Library. And I was following this squat, short man just running down these corridors that are claustrophobic even at my short height. And suddenly he stopped, surveying his library from its guts. And he said, this is the DNA of our civilization. And I was so stunned. It was a revelation for me that, of course it was. This was the building blocks of everything that we are. And indeed, all libraries, all educational institutions, all historical societies, all public television outlets, they are part of the DNA of our civilization, and passing down to the next generation what we will be remembered for. And it was a magnificent moment. And so I come to you this evening thrilled that we'll have a chance to have a conversation, but also to tell you that I am excited always to celebrate the special messages the past, our common heritage, our common history, continually directs our way. And we don't listen to this very often. The senator is fond of saying Harry Truman's dictum that the only thing that's really new is the history you don't know. And it is absolutely true. If you don't know where you've been, you can't possibly know where you are and where you are going. And yet, in our hurly-burly life, where we focus entirely on the present moment, we lose that connection to the past, and we lose that connection to the threads that bind us all together. And I am interested in the power of history and its many varied voices, not just the voices of an old top-down version of our past that would tell us that American history is only the story of great men, capital G, capital M. You know, this is the history of the state, and it basically sees American history as the sequence of presidential administrations punctuated by wars. But I'm also drawn to other voices, and I reject the notion that those bottom-up voices are merely cataloging white European crimes. I'm interested in listening to the voices of a true, honest, complicated past that is unafraid of controversy and tragedy, but equally drawn to those stories and moments that suggest an abiding faith in the human spirit, and particularly the unique role this remarkable but also sometimes dysfunctional republic seems to play in the positive progress of mankind. That, quite simply, has been my creed, my mantra, the lens through which I have tried to see our history, our histories, over the last 30-plus years, and tried to learn how to tell them. it's an interesting thing. You begin to realize that in a way, as you get up each day, you're making the same film over and over again. Each film asks one deceptively simple question: who are we? Who are we? Who are these strange and complicated people who like to call themselves Americans? What does an investigation of the past tell us, not only where we have been, but where we are and where we are going? Because the past is gone, ladies and gentlemen. We'll never get it back. But history is the set of questions we in the present ask of the past. And so it is informed not just by the events, the dates, the facts, the boring things we hated to learn in school, but it's informed also by the questions we ask. Subtly and unsubtly, our unconscious fears, our worries, our anxieties, our hopes, and our dreams. And that's the history I'm trying to bring back. That's the history that I think wakes me up every day as I engage in it. You know, American history is a loud, raucous, exquisite collection of noises that in the aggregate often combine to make the sweetest kind of music I know. And I have tried to listen to this music as much as I can in putting together the films we have made. It is a kind of emotional archaeology that we are attempting. This is not trying to insist that it is memorization, that the dry shards of the past have any meaning, but the emotional archaeology is the glue that holds those dates, those facts, those events that seem to have little meaning. Castor oil to most of us, you know, good for us but hardly good tasting. It's an emotional archaeology, listening to the ghosts and echoes of an almost inexpressibly wise past that paradoxically points us confidently towards those future horizons that will comprise our fate as individuals, as communities, as corporations, and certainly in the end, as a country. And that is what my professional life for the last 30-plus years has been about, trying to share the American experience. And you begin to understand that we are all, whether we know it or not, in the business of words. But alas, those words often evaporate, their precision blunted by neglect, their insight diminished by the sheer volume of their ever-increasing brethren, their force diluted by ancient animosities that sets one group against the other. You know, the historian Arthur Schlesinger Jr., the late historian Arthur Schlesinger Jr. was fond of saying that we suffer today from too much pluribus and not enough unum. And he was right. He was right. Few things survive in these cynical days to remind us of the union from which so many of our personal as well as collective blessings flow. And it is hard not to wonder in an age when the present moment consumes and overshadows all else, our bright past and a dim, unknown future, what finally does endure, what encodes and stores the genetic material of this civilization, or at least what we hope will pass down to future generations, that will mutate into some betterness for our children and our posterity. And I think that in some way, history holds an answer, paradoxically holds a hugely important answer. Nothing in our daily life offers us more of the comfort of continuity, the generational connection of belonging to a vast and complicated American family, the sense of home and the accumulated gift that accumulating memory means. And that's what history is. For most people, it's a boring subject that they were made to take in 11th grade when somebody held a proverbial gun to their head and made them memorize it. Or worse, what we find today is our children end up graduating from high school and even college without ever having history, without having the rudimentary knowledge of the most basic aspects of our civic and of our collective life. And yet, all of us are bound by history. Everything. History is the great pageant of everything that has gone before this moment. And so that everything that we do becomes history in the next moment, and we are bound to recollect it in some way or another. Perhaps, as the Delaware Historical Society does, across the whole arc of the half a millennium history of the state of Delaware, or perhaps in the way we save the memories of our father or our great-grandfathers or our mothers or our great-grandmothers in the letters or the diaries or the photo albums that we preciously keep. This is a really hugely important part of it. If for me, the DNA of my work are the still photographs that we singly try to will to life by filming them with an energetic and exploring camera eye, not holding them at arm's length, but penetrating the surface and adding not just a third-person narrator, the old voice of God, but first-person voices, a chorus of American voices reading diaries and love letters and journals and newspaper accounts and military dispatches to bring to life, but also period music played with period instruments and sound effects, as if you not only looked at the photograph, but you listened to it. Were the troops tramping? Were the cannon firing? Were the bats cracking? Were the crowds cheering? What is it that you could do to bring that history alive? How could you make that come back and help to erase the horrific arrogance those of us in the present have over those who lived before us? Because we have survived, or at least so far has survived, we've assumed that we're smarter than them, that we know more than the people that went before us, that they couldn't possibly have had conversations as deep, as complicated as the ones they have. This is a horrible arrogance. Human nature has never changed. People 5,000 years ago had as complicated and as dynamic and as amazing conversations as we can have today. And it is our responsibility, those, the living, as Abraham Lincoln would say, to extend to those in the past the fullness and the richness and the power and the glory and the importance of the lives they so obviously led.